The server room always smelled like burned wires, overheated metal, and stress. After 10 years in that underground maze of humming machines, I could tell what kind of disaster was coming just by the smell in the air. Most people upstairs thought our company was some sleek defense contractor with polished executives and million-dollar deals. But down in the basement where I worked, it felt more like babysitting a nuclear reactor built out of duct tape and bad decisions. My name is Evelyn Carter, and for a decade I was the Senior Systems Compliance Director at Aerodyne Solutions. Fancy title, miserable job. Basically, I spent every waking hour making sure idiots with business degrees did not accidentally trigger a federal investigation. I knew every inch of that building better than the executives did. I knew which server rack overheated if the cooling cycle drifted by 2 degrees. I knew which firewall patch had to be manually refreshed every 6 hours because the software vendor never fixed the bug. I knew which classified systems would lock down if somebody sneezed wrong during a data transfer. The company survived because I kept it alive with caffeine, exhaustion, and pure stubbornness while executives upstairs argued about profit margins over catered lunches. The day everything collapsed started on a Tuesday morning, which somehow felt appropriate. Tuesdays are ugly days. Monday still has momentum, Friday has hope, but Tuesday is where careers go to die quietly. I was halfway through tracing suspicious packet loss in one of our defense subnetworks when my phone vibrated across the desk. The message came from HR. Bring your badge and report to conference room B immediately. No explanation, no warning, just the corporate version of a gunshot. I already knew what it meant before I stood up. You do this kind of work long enough, you develop instincts for disaster. The building suddenly felt colder as I rode the elevator to the 12th floor. Conference room B sat behind a wall of expensive glass overlooking the city skyline, the kind of room executives used when they wanted people to feel small before destroying them. When I walked in, the new CFO was sitting at the head of the table like he owned the world. His name was Trevor Lang. Trevor looked like every corporate predator rolled into one human body. Perfect hair, blindingly white teeth, tailored suit, fake confidence. He had only worked there for 3 weeks, but he already carried himself like he built the company from scratch. Beside him sat Melissa from HR, avoiding eye contact so hard it almost looked painful. Trevor smiled at me the way rich people smile at hotel staff. Evelyn, thanks for coming, please have a seat. I stayed standing. What is this about? He folded his hands together dramatically. We have been conducting a comprehensive financial optimization review across multiple departments, and unfortunately we identified some redundancies within your division. I almost laughed. Division, Trevor, I am the division. His smile twitched slightly, but he kept going. Exactly, which is why we decided to transition your responsibilities to a more scalable outsourced infrastructure model. There it was, corporate language for cheaper labor. You outsourced classified defense compliance, I asked slowly. Trevor leaned back in his chair like he was delivering a TED Talk. We contracted a highly rated international technology firm with extensive remote administration capabilities, very agile, very modern. I stared at him for several seconds because I genuinely thought he might be joking. Do they have TS clearance? He blinked. TS, top secret clearance, I said. The systems downstairs contain Department of Defense logistics data. You cannot legally allow uncleared personnel near those servers. Trevor chuckled softly like I was being dramatic. You tech people always overcomplicate everything. Data is data, Evelyn, ones and zeros. We are simply modernizing operations. That sentence changed everything. I felt something cold settle into my chest. Not panic, not fear, something worse. The kind of calm people probably feel right before a hurricane hits land. You are making a catastrophic mistake, I told him quietly. Melissa shifted nervously in her chair, but Trevor kept smiling. Regardless, today will be your final day with the company. We will need your badge and authentication token before you leave. I could have argued, I could have screamed. I could have explained exactly how many federal laws he was about to violate. Instead, I slowly unclipped my badge and dropped it onto the polished table. Then I pulled the RSA security token from my pocket and placed it beside the badge with a soft click. Trevor looked pleased with himself. He thought he had won. I looked him directly in the eyes. Your new team knows about the midnight handshake protocols, right? He waved dismissively. They have everything they need. That was the moment I realized he had absolutely no idea what he had done. I nodded once. Good luck, Trevor. Then I walked out without another word. I packed my office slowly, one framed picture of my dog. A coffee mug stained by 10 years of overnight shifts. A cactus that somehow survived longer than most employees. I left behind the documentation manuals I spent years building because suddenly I understood something important. Trevor did not even know what questions to ask. The outsourced team would work from scripts and templates. They would not know about the fragile custom infrastructure buried underneath the system. They would not know the secure uplinks required manual verification cycles. They would not know the server cluster automatically interpreted failed midnight authentication as hostile intrusion. Most importantly, they would not know that I designed the system to protect itself from stupidity. By the time I reached the parking garage, the sun felt offensive. People were outside eating lunch and laughing while a federal disaster counted down toward midnight. I sat inside my old Honda for a while without turning the engine on. Then I lit my first cigarette in almost 4 years. Fiscal optimization, I muttered to myself. I drove home, stopped for expensive bourbon, and waited. At exactly 11:58 that night, I sat alone in my apartment staring at my phone. The TV played some late-night comedy show in the background, but I was not watching it. My entire nervous system was focused on one thing: the servers. People outside the industry do not understand this, but when you spend years building critical systems, they become part of your brain. You feel them even from miles away. I knew the overnight synchronization jobs were preparing to start. I knew the secure authentication cycle would begin at midnight, and I knew Trevor's new offshore team was about to walk blindfolded into a minefield. At 12:01 a.m., my phone buzzed. System alert, unauthorized access attempt detected. I smiled slowly. Right on schedule. The contractors were trying to access the defense repository using standard remote desktop login procedures. That alone told me everything. They had no secure tunnel configured. No encrypted government gateway, no authentication token, just usernames and passwords. Idiots. The alerts kept coming. Invalid credentials. Access denied. Unauthorized admin request. My phone buzzed nonstop across the coffee table like a dying insect. Then came the alert that made my stomach tighten. Protocol 7 initiated. I closed my eyes briefly. Protocol 7 was my creation. Years earlier, the Pentagon auditors demanded an autonomous defense response system in case hostile foreign access was detected. I built it personally. Protocol 7 did not simply deny access. It declared war. The system automatically isolated classified infrastructure, initiated trace routing, locked audit records, and alerted federal monitoring systems. Every keystroke made by the contractors would now be logged as potential cyber intrusion evidence. At that point, if I wanted to, I still could have stopped it. I still had hidden emergency access pathways buried deep in the infrastructure. I could have remotely disabled the lockdown, reset the authentication cycle, and saved the company. But then I remembered Trevor smiling across that conference table. Data is data. I poured another glass of bourbon. Not my problem anymore. Around 1:30 in the morning, I left the apartment and drove to an all-night diner called Miller's Grill because sitting alone with my thoughts was unbearable. The place smelled like burnt coffee and old fryer grease, which somehow matched my mood perfectly. I ordered black coffee and pie, opened my laptop, and logged into the building's security cameras. Trevor revoked my server credentials, but he forgot one critical detail. I also maintained the physical security network because facilities management never learned how to handle it themselves. The camera feeds loaded slowly across my screen. Most of the office was dark and empty, but the server room looked like a nightmare. Red warning lights flashed across the racks while cooling fans screamed at maximum speed. Then I saw movement on another monitor. The offshore team had remotely connected to an employee workstation inside the network and were desperately trying to bypass security controls manually. I watched them open command prompts, network settings, admin panels. It was horrifying. They changed internal DNS settings. My coffee nearly slipped from my hand. Oh no. The second they altered network routing inside a classified enclave, the system escalated from unauthorized access to active compromise. Every light in the server room suddenly switched solid red. Full lockdown. The contractors froze. They had completely isolated themselves from the system. I actually laughed out loud. The waitress walking past my booth raised an eyebrow. Rough night, she asked. You could say that. She topped off my coffee without another word. Then my personal phone rang. Building security. I stared at the screen while it vibrated. Old Mr. Jenkins from Night Security was probably panicking because the environmental systems automatically shut down during lockdown protocols. The server room would become an oven within the hour. I let the call go to voicemail. A minute later, another alert appeared on my phone. Federal oversight triggered. Level 1 escalation. That was the moment the situation officially became irreversible. The system had already pinged the Department of Defense monitoring network. Somewhere in Virginia, federal cybersecurity personnel were now receiving alerts that a classified contractor facility might be compromised. I leaned back in the diner booth and stared through the window into the dark parking lot. Trevor had no idea what was coming. By 4 in the morning, my phone contained dozens of missed calls. The first voicemail from Trevor sounded irritated. Evelyn, there appears to be some kind of glitch with the systems you configured. The remote team cannot log in. Call me immediately. The second voicemail sounded angry. Did you sabotage these servers before leaving? Because legal will absolutely be involved if you damaged company infrastructure. The third voicemail sounded scared. Evelyn, listen to me carefully. There are federal officials asking questions I cannot answer. I need the access codes. The fourth voicemail sounded desperate. Please call me. The server room temperature is critical. Fire department is here. I do not know how to disable the thermal lockdown. The fifth voicemail sounded broken. Federal agents just arrived. They are asking for you specifically. I replayed that last message twice. Then my phone rang again. Private number. I answered calmly. This is Evelyn. The voice on the other end sounded like gravel grinding together. Miss Carter. This is General Marcus Hale with United States Cyber Defense Command. Do not disconnect this call. I sat upright immediately. Yes, General, we have an active level red escalation originating from Aerodyne Solutions. Your name is listed as Primary Systems Authority. Current management appears unable to secure the infrastructure. I looked out the apartment window at the sunrise beginning to color the sky orange. I no longer work there, General. I was terminated yesterday afternoon. Silence filled the line. Then his voice dropped lower. You were terminated while holding primary classified access authority? Yes, sir. Another long silence followed. Finally, he exhaled sharply. Miss Carter, I am formally requesting your assistance under federal authority. Can you return to the facility immediately? I smiled for the first time all night. I can be there in 20 minutes. The parking lot outside Aerodyne looked like a military operation when I arrived. Police cruisers blocked the entrances. Fire trucks lined the curb. Black government SUVs sat outside the building like predators waiting to feed. Employees stood clustered together near the sidewalk, whispering nervously. When I stepped out of my Honda, several people recognized me instantly. The expressions on their faces were priceless. Yesterday I was fired. Today federal agents were escorting me past crime scene tape. Inside the lobby, chaos ruled everything. DOJ forensic teams unpacked equipment while armed agents moved through the halls. Emergency lights flashed across the ceiling, and standing near the reception desk was Trevor. He looked destroyed. His suit was wrinkled, his face pale, his hair damp with sweat. He was arguing with a tall military officer whose presence filled the room like thunder. General Hale turned as I approached. Trevor saw me and nearly stumbled forward. Evelyn, thank God. Tell them this is just a technical issue, fix it. A federal agent blocked him immediately. I ignored Trevor completely and walked straight to the general. General Hale, I said calmly. Miss Carter? He replied, shaking my hand firmly. We are very pleased to see you. Trevor looked between us in disbelief. The general glanced toward him coldly. This man terminated you yesterday? Budget optimization, I answered. General Hale stared at Trevor with pure disgust. This incident is currently costing taxpayers approximately $70,000 per hour, he said. That optimization appears mathematically unsound. Trevor looked like he might faint. I shifted immediately into work mode. What is current thermal status? 92 degrees and climbing, the general answered. Fire suppression teams are standing by. I nodded sharply. We still have time barely. They escorted me upstairs toward the secured server floor. Heat radiated through the hallway walls before we even reached the room. The emergency terminal glowed red beside the blast door. System halted. Authentication required. I sat down and began typing commands. The general hovered nearby while agents watched silently. I bypassed 3 layers of lockdown protections and forced emergency cooling override protocols. But the system rejected the commands. Physical token required. Where is my RSA token? I asked without looking up. Trevor swallowed hard. I think it got thrown away. The general turned toward him slowly. Find it. Agents practically dragged Trevor away. I kept typing. 94 degrees. Any higher and the hardware itself would begin failing. A few minutes later Trevor returned carrying the authentication token with shaking hands. General Hale grabbed it from him and inserted it directly into the terminal. The screen flashed green. Authentication accepted. I executed the override sequence instantly. A massive mechanical roar echoed through the walls as the cooling systems restarted. The temperature readings finally began dropping. 93, 91, 88. Everyone in the hallway visibly relaxed. But I was not finished. I pulled up the intrusion logs on screen. There they are, I said quietly. The offshore contractors had attempted hundreds of unauthorized access requests using unsecured remote administration software. One line in particular caught the general's attention. TeamViewer Free Edition detected. The general stared at the screen in disbelief. They attempted to access classified military infrastructure using free remote desktop software? Yes, sir. He slowly turned toward Trevor. That expression on his face genuinely frightened me a little. Do you comprehend the scale of your negligence? He asked softly. Trevor looked ready to collapse. I was trying to save money. You endangered Department of Defense operational systems to reduce payroll expenses, the general replied. That is not cost reduction. That is federal criminal negligence. Trevor slid into a chair looking completely broken. The company CEO arrived shortly afterward alongside several terrified lawyers. They all crowded into the same conference room where Trevor fired me less than 24 hours earlier. Only now the power dynamic had completely reversed. I sat at the head of the table beside General Hale while Trevor sat silently in the corner looking like a condemned prisoner. The general addressed the executives coldly. By terminating Miss Carter without secure transfer of classified authority, your company violated multiple federal compliance statutes and triggered an active cyber defense response. The CEO stammered apologies while blaming miscommunication and restructuring confusion. General Hale shut him down instantly. No, this was not confusion. This was greed mixed with incompetence. Then he pointed toward me. That woman is the only reason your company still possesses a federal contract this morning. The room fell silent. Finally, the CEO looked at me directly. Evelyn, whatever compensation package you require, we will make it happen. I leaned back calmly. I am no longer interested in employment. His face fell. However, I continued, I am willing to operate as an independent federal compliance consultant at triple my previous salary plus emergency recovery billing. The CEO nodded immediately. Done. I glanced toward Trevor. Also, I want his office. Trevor closed his eyes. By noon the building had stabilized. The servers cooled safely back to operational temperatures. Federal investigators isolated the breach attempts. The offshore contractor accounts were permanently blacklisted, and I sat inside Trevor's former corner office overlooking the entire city. General Hale stopped by once the worst of the crisis ended. You knew this would happen, didn't you? He asked. I looked out through the glass windows quietly. I knew the system would respond exactly the way it was designed to respond. He smiled slightly. You built infrastructure capable of defending itself against stupidity. No, I corrected gently. I built infrastructure capable of surviving management. That made him laugh harder than anything else all day. Before leaving, he handed me temporary federal authorization paperwork. Effective immediately, you are acting compliance authority for this facility during recovery operations. I accepted the folder. Then I opened my laptop and checked the system dashboard one final time. Operational status, stable. Primary administrator, Evelyn Carter. I leaned back in the expensive leather chair Trevor used to love so much. The office smelled different now, cleaner somehow. Outside the window, the city moved normally. Traffic crawled through downtown streets, people hurried to work. Nobody beyond those walls understood how close one arrogant executive came to destroying an entire company, because he thought expertise was too expensive. My company chat pinged with a message from HR. Should we begin recruiting a replacement CFO? I smiled slowly while typing my reply. No need from now on, I approve the budgets. Then I closed the laptop, lit a cigarette beside the open window, and watched the smoke disappear into the skyline while federal agents escorted Trevor out of the building downstairs. Some lessons cost more than money, and some people only understand value after everything catches fire.